Hello and welcome to A Conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller. Today I'm joined by a really wonderful activist, environmentalist from the International Marine Mammal Project, IMMP, which is from Berkeley's Earth Institute, Earth Island Institute. That's a mouthful. Mark J. Palmer. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for taking some time to talk with me. When we were in campaign cycle, I had a lot of candidates on, and a lot of that was here's going to be a terrible pun right out of the gate. A lot of that was dry, so I'm mixing it up by having it. I'll leave that alone. But yeah, obviously you work a lot in conservation and preserving marine mammals, and I want to ask about their population, how climate change is affecting them, how we can help, what initiatives your program is spearheading, and so forth. But a little bit about your background. What got you into this field personally?
Well, I actually started a group called the Endangered Species Committee of Berkeley when I was a student at the University of California at Berkeley, along about 1970, 1971. So since then, I've been working on a variety of issues through the years, including stints working with the Mountain Lion Foundation, a lot of work on whales and dolphins, of course, and a lot of work on endangered species and protection of parklands and things. I was executive director of the Whale Center based in Oakland and executive director of the Mountain Lion Foundation and chairman of the Sierra Club's National Wildlife Committee for a while. So I've bounced around for quite a bit.
Wow. One thing that I want to kind of put a bit of a personal touch on this before we get into some of the policy things and so forth. And I want to close on some really amazing videos that are put out by your group. Can you share, I'm putting you on the spot with this one, can you share like a personal experience that, that might have been like exhilarating in your sort of dealings with marine mammals? Like, I'm sure there are tons that come to mind, but just one that, heartwarming, something that, humanizes them in a way.
Well, one of the things we came up with, I was actually meeting one time with a representative of a California senator, along with my mentor, Jim Schroeder. And it turned out we were talking about walruses, and legislation to allow walrus hunting was introduced into the legislature in Congress. And we had, in this discussion, we talked about the importance of it, and people were rushing in and out at the same time we were talking with this aide. And it turned out that it was the fall of Vietnam, and they were trying to get out some of the last of the Vietnamese children from American soldiers. And we said, oh, that's a terrible thing. And she gave one of those kind of shrugging questions about, yeah, talk about an endangered species. And at that point, my friend Jim Schroeder stopped her and said, what I see, frankly, between the Vietnamese situation, the Vietnamese children, and the plight of the walrus and other endangered species, it's the same rearing ugly head of the same monster that is in fact involved in both those situations. It's greed, it's violence, and taking advantage, if you will, of the weak and the innocent, in this case endangered species and children. And they're both the same kind of root cause that we find throughout the world on many, many of these problems. So working for endangered species, I always felt was working for the public. It's working for people as well as the species themselves.
Yeah, wow,
it benefits everybody.
Yeah, here. Thanks for sharing that. Can you talk about the origins of the IMMP?
Well, yeah, basically, as you mentioned, we're a part of the international organization called Earth Island Institute. Earth Island was established by David Brower, the great conservationist and person who really did a lot for the environmental movement, the modern environmental movement, through his work with the Sierra Club and Friends of the Earth and Earth Island Institute. We have 80 projects that are associated with Earth Island Institute, one of which is the International Marine Mammal Project. So we get around with a whole lot of different environmental programs around the world. The International Marine Mammal Project was one of the oldest. It started right about the time that Earth Island started in 1982, and is focused on marine mammals. We're one of the groups, for example, that established the Dolphin Safe label on tuna cans. It was our initiative to campaign against the tuna companies for setting nets on dolphins and drowning hundreds of thousands of dolphins. And the official count of dolphins being killed now is about 1,000 in the tuna fishery, down from 80 to 100,000 dolphins back in the 1980s, before the Dolphin Safe program went into effect. So it's been one of the most effective conservation programs around. We also were the group that took Keiko, the orca star of the movie Free Willy. He was in a small aquarium in Mexico, and we brought him back to his home waters in Iceland and released him, and he spent some time there. He eventually died, unfortunately, but he had several years of freedom in the ocean, and it taught us a lot about how to rehabilitate and release these animals, such as orcas. It's the first effort for a captive orca ever to be released alive back into the wild. Most of them died very early in captivity.
Yeah. I want to ask a little bit about captivity. We could do a whole episode just on that, but since you mentioned that, that the severe, like the amazing metric in the drop off of dolphins captured in the tuna fishing industry that you mentioned, are there sort of tentpole metrics that you look at globally in terms of population, and what's how many, this is an immense scope of a question, but what's the global footprint of marine mammals look like? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? What's the baseline at the moment?
Well, it varies considerably according to the species and the region. There are a number of dolphins species that are very limited in range, and some of them are in very desperate shape. The vaquita, for example, the little harbor porpoise that's found in the Gulf of the Gulf of California, Sea of Cortez, is in very, very, very depressed state. We probably only have a half dozen or a dozen of those animals left from the net fisheries that are going on there that entangle these animals and drown them. We have a similar problem with the Maui dolphin and the Hector's dolphin in New Zealand, with some of the fisheries going on there. In the other cases, we've got pretty good populations of the great whales coming back from very near extinction, which happened during the early part of the 20th century on in through most of the 20th century. We did get a moratorium on commercial whaling in effect in 1986 through the International Whaling Commission, but there are still some bad players, and we still have a couple of countries, Japan, Norway, and to a lesser extent Iceland. Iceland did not go whaling the last couple of years, and we're kind of hoping that will continue to peter out. But Norway and Japan continue to kill whales, and we'd like them to stop. But other places, we've seen humpback whales and blue whales making a return and increasing in numbers. We have a number of right whales that have recovered a little bit on the East Coast, but now they're in decline due to, again, these are ropes that they get entangled in, ropes that are used for crab fishing and lobster fishing. So there's a lot of entanglement there. There's also ship strikes against right whales. They tend to be fairly slow and on the surface. And so we get a lot of problems there. So it varies considerably. The good news is that in cases such as the humpback whale, if we stop killing them, if we get rid of these problems that are occurring in the ocean, they will come back and they will increase in numbers, and we'll see them again in places like the humpback whale that recently swam into New York Harbor and got a lot of publicity. They do come back if we do the right thing.
Right on. Yeah, there was another news story this week about a species that had been kind of assumed extinct that reappeared. There was another one or two. I didn't sort of read them, but there was a couple big news stories this week in marine mammal news. Can you share those, and what do they reflect?
Well, the one that I think you mentioned is that there's a new species of beaked whales which has just been discovered. It's been there probably all along, and just nobody noticed it. Beaked whales are very difficult to study. They tend to be in very deep waters. They tend to be solitary or in very small groups. So it's very hard to identify them. Some beaked whales are only known from a few skulls, for example, that have washed up on ocean shore. And these new beaked whales have been identified. They're hoping to get some better DNA examples from them by shooting a little dart into the whale and then popping it out with the skin, and you can then check that skin plug without harming the whale.
Right.
And look at its DNA content and determine that it is a whole new species. And that's still happening. It's pretty amazing that an animal as big as the whale is still unknown to science. We think of ourselves as pretty ubiquitous throughout the world, and we are. But we still see these species popping up around the world that have never been seen before.
That's amazing. Yeah. Obviously, one of the things you talk about fishing and so forth, but what are the effects of the climate crisis on whales? And I imagine, or marine mammals. I imagine it impacts their migration and their feeding patterns and things like that. And maybe it even leads to some of these previously undiscovered species having to alter their behaviors, and then we can spot them now, right? Can you talk about the
Possibly.
effects of climate crisis on marine mammals?
Yeah, there's a number of problems with the whole issue of global warming. We know, of course, of the high temperatures that are caused, and we think this is going to disrupt some of their feeding. As you mentioned, warm water contains less oxygen than cold water. This is just a physical result, basic physics. And because of that, you get less biological activity in warmer water than you do generally in colder waters. So that's a big concern. Another issue is the question of acidification of the ocean, because CO2, carbon dioxide, is a mild acid. And as more and more carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, we're actually turning the oceans from salty, slightly more acidic. And at some point, it becomes very difficult for some of the smaller organisms, such as krill that whales feed upon, to incorporate calcium into their skeletons. This is true of coral reefs. It's true of amphipods and a number of other different little tiny creatures that form the base of the food chain, not just for whales, but for the entire ocean. So
Right.
we're very concerned about ocean acidification and how it's going to interfere with these animals being able to survive at the very lowest level of the food chain that then feeds whales and dolphins and other species, sharks. Human beings, of course, we get a lot of our protein from the oceans, and fisheries are in dire straits in many, many cases, and ocean acidification is not going to help.
Yeah. Are you seeing, and that's irreversible. Are you seeing, like, are we at a plateau? Are we about to, what does that look like? I mean, that's how
Mhm.
do you, and how do you have hope through that? Right.
Well, that's a good question. I live in California, where we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of dealing with global warming. So there's hope on the horizon, I think, in terms of showing how to do it. I also think that there's a lot of money to be made by people who address global warming and come up with alternatives
Mm.
to the burning of fossil fuels and alternative cars and alternative manufacturing processes that can get away from the dumping of CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the ocean. So there are some good things happening, but like Greta Thunberg, we haven't clearly done enough at all, and she's absolutely right that we need to do much, much more.
Yeah. Here, here. Before I get too much further along, I want to pull up the website just to highlight a little bit, and obviously ask for donations. Right, you certainly are down for donations, so you can donate here. Um, y-
Yeah,
the-
all organizations I think are hurting right now because of the pandemic and the economic downturn. So If people can reach into their pocket and pull out some extra money for the International Marine Mammal Project, for the many other fine organizations that are out there working on the environment, working on healthcare, working on all kinds of different issues, that they all need money, and it's always an issue of trying to get more funds.
Here, here. Yeah, if you just donate like $5, $10 to, a bunch of causes, you can have a massive impact.
Very
Uh,
much so.
yeah, your website, savedolphins.eii.org,
Mhm.
from the Earth Island Institute.org, savedolphins.eii.org. A lot of your campaigns are listed here. Uh, Obviously, I could talk to you all day about these. I'd love to have you back to go into further on some of these further, but let's just talk a little bit about, let's say, captivity. That's a bit of a high profile one. You touched on it earlier, the problems with, the sea worlds of the world, and the uh, deleterious effects they have on marine mammals. Can you talk about, what IMMP is doing about that captivity?
Yeah, it to a lot of people, it's not really clear what the problem is. Basically, these are extremely intelligent animals that we're talking about: dolphins, whales, belugas, pilot whales. They really don't belong in very small concrete tanks. It's a very sterile environment for them. And these, again, are very intelligent animals, and they suffer a great deal of stress. They suffer a great deal of boredom in captivity. And because of that, we think that it affects their immune systems. And we see a lot of these animals dying at a very early age in captivity. The average age of orcas, for example, male orcas get up to 50 years old in the wild. Females can be 90 years old, or perhaps even older in the wild, whereas in captivity, the males tend to die when in their 20s and 30s, and the females also don't really last that long. There's a couple of exceptions, but they are the exception to the rule. There's a couple of females that have been in captivity for about 50 years, but only two of them. Most of the rest have died. And because of that, we really need to do something about phasing out captivity. One of the ways to do that is to provide them with seaside sanctuaries, which is one of the things we're doing. That's my phone. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
One of the problems we have is getting enough funding together to put together a sanctuary for these animals. We have sanctuaries for elephants. We have sanctuaries for primates. It's important to get a retirement sanctuary together for whales and dolphins. In captivity, whales and dolphins are kept hungry, for example. They don't do the type of things that they're supposed to do in terms of being able to do their tricks unless they're hungry. And so they're kept hungry during the day. They're fed at night, but it really is a very stressful situation for them to keep doing the same stupid routines over and over again that they do during the shows. So there's a variety of problems with captivity that we'd like to see end.
Is there any way to, you know, how is that not just straight up animal cruelty and illegal? Is there any legislation, targeting specifically that thing you said about keeping them hungry?
Not so far. Unfortunately, Congress moved the jurisdiction of keeping these animals in captivity under the Department of Agriculture. And the Department of Agriculture, as you know, has never been particularly good about the humane treatment of domestic animals. Chickens and cows and pigs and others are in some pretty horrendous situations in factory farms. And because of that, we just don't see the much progress there with regards to marine mammals. So we're hoping, though, that we can, especially with the new Congress and a new president, perhaps move some legislation forward in the next couple of years to help retire some of these animals.
Yeah, here. Let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, again, on your website, savedolphins.eii.org, you can sign up for their newsletter. And Mark writes, recurring pieces of, news, pieces about what's happening, drilling, and, the how terrible Trump was and so forth, right? Policy oriented focus, but there's a lot of great content there. What obviously drilling, Trump has been terrible on the environment. What's the most egregious things in the last 4 years? And, what are you hoping for in the next 4?
Well, certainly his pressure to continue using fossil fuels has been very destructive to, although he hasn't gotten as far as he would like, thanks to the work of many organizations, including IMP, with regards to lawsuits and comments that we filed and various other steps we've taken to block going forward with offshore oil drilling, for example, in areas that are sensitive for marine mammals. So looking at those sorts of things, burning of coal is a terrible idea, both from a pollution standpoint and from greenhouse gas standpoints. So the support for fossil fuels by the Trump administration has been very disappointing and backwards in terms of where we need to go. And we're very hopeful that President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris will be able to reverse that direction and really get us moving on addressing the global warming problems that we're facing these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, offshore drilling. There's the in the Arctic that just got delayed, right? If I'm not mistaken, was that a fight you guys were on the front lines?
We weren't on the front lines in that. There's been a number of other good organizations that have been taking the lead on Arctic drilling and some of the lawsuits involving in that.
Great. Yeah, I don't want to necessarily, Joe Biden. Obviously Donald Trump is a unique terror, right? But Joe Biden isn't necessarily great on fossil fuels either, right? So, what's the outlook on that front? Obviously, he could be better, but he has lobbyists in his ear and his cabinet, and he needs pressure just the same.
Very much so. It's going to be a shift for us in terms of what we can do in cooperation with the new administration, as well as keeping them on their toes and when they are wrong, pointing that out to them, including using litigation and various other techniques we have, going to Congress for help, and seeing if we can't do a lot better with this administration. Mr. Biden is certainly one of the more mainstream Democrats, if you will, and not as radical as perhaps we'd like to see him on environmental issues. So it's going to be an uphill push, whatever happens. It's just we actually have something to push against as opposed to a brick wall.
Here, here. Yeah, it's that was a lot of people making that vote. If Biden wasn't your first choice, it was going from a defensive posture. At least we can, like you said, sort of push the boulder uphill. We can be offensive, right? We can go on the offense a little bit, right? So
definitely.
Yeah, that's the difference. What's a hot topic front line that maybe people don't know enough about that you would want to highlight?
Well, one of the things we're doing, I have my Save Japan Dolphins t-shirt on. We were the organization featured in the documentary The Cove, which focused on Rick O'Berry from our staff and our work in Japan to try to highlight the killing of dolphins by Japan. And as I mentioned earlier, Japan is still a whaling nation as well, killing large whales as well as the very small dolphins. This is a terrible idea because the food, as meat, they're basically eating whales and dolphins, and the dolphins in particular are highly contaminated with mercury, something that is the worst poison in the world that we know, next to plutonium. So it's a terrible idea to eat dolphin meat, to have that for sale on the menu, as well as extremely inhumane the way that they kill the dolphins by shoving a spike down in the back of their head in order to kill them. So we've worked very hard to do that. Upcoming in 2021 is the Tokyo Olympics. And so we think that gives us an opportunity to go to the world and promote the idea that Japan should stop killing whales and dolphins as a public gesture to the world before the Olympics come up. And we're working on that, including working with a few former Olympians to put together some list of Olympians that support ending the killing of dolphin and whales by Japan.
That's great. Yeah, and again, that's on savedolphins.eii.org. And the film you mentioned, The Cove, it's been probably 2 or 3 years since I've seen that, but just like you and anyone that's seen it, it is haunting. It's it is grisly and brutal, and the ocean, the cove turns red, and it is horrendous. But it's one of those things you have to look at, right? You have to confront it in order to change, to bring about change. So
fortunately, the horrendous parts are fairly short, so you can fast forward through it. If you see it, it is very hard to watch in some bits, but it's fairly short bits, fortunately. And it is a highly unusual documentary. It won the Academy Award, and it's won 30 awards. That was done by our great friends at the oh, now my mind just took a blank on the name of the group that did it, but Luis Sahoyos and his ocean group that did such a fine job on that documentary.
Yeah, amazing. And that they do that annually. I think it just
Yes.
passed, right?
Yeah, it's a 6-month season, so they're still in the process of killing them right now, and will through the end of March.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you haven't seen The Cove, don't let us describing it here deter you from seeing it. It's kind of a must watch, and you'll be changed, and you'll be inspired to advocate for change by watching it. Well, Mark, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. There's a lot of issues that I want to dig into further with you. I'd love to have you back, and keep talking about this. And if there's ever any news or anything you want to platform a little bit, just by all means, you have my email and I'm at your disposal. It's savedolphins.eii.org, and go check out the website, subscribe to the newsletters, follow their socials, share this video. Read Mark's work. What they're doing is critical, right? And like we were just saying, Trump, thankfully we've vanquished Trump, and he'll be out in whatever 36 days as we air this, right? But that doesn't mean it's over, right? Getting in the Paris Climate Accord is not enough. We need to keep pressuring, right? And there's there's a lot of programs that Mark and his team are working on. So get involved, and if you don't have time, throw a little bit of money, and are there other ways that people can help that you can think of?
Definitely. We encourage people to contact their elected representatives on a regular basis about the importance, and our blogs help instruct that in terms of what's hot and what's timely, in terms of where to send comments, for example, on a government proposal or legislation in Congress, how to contact your congressman. So there's a variety of things people can do. We have a number of petitions on our website as well. It's Save Dolphins, and that's dolphins plural, by the way, savedolphins.eii.org. And we're happy to accommodate people there and help them take action themselves.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you. Thanks again for all the work you've done heretofore, and being a leader in this realm. It's appreciated. I'm going to close on 2 videos. One is called Ocean Innovators. It's about 2 weeks old. It's about a minute and a half. Kind of shows a little bit, about what IMMP does. And then I'm going to play a clip from about 2 years ago that you guys put out called The Lives of Wild Dolphins. Because as handsome as you and I are, Mark, people want to see dolphins. And
absolutely.
Right. So let's give them what they want to see. Right. And it's informative as well. So I appreciate what you do. Stay safe. And hopefully I will talk to you again soon, my friend.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whales and other dolphins are highly intelligent, social animals that roam vast ocean areas in close family groups. Science and experience makes it more clear every day that it's cruel to hold dolphins in concrete tanks to perform tricks for entertainment and profit. And there is a growing movement to protect them worldwide from human harm and captivity. Let's look at the lives of wild dolphins to see how they live, what their cultures are like, and how they each have individual personalities. They have some of the largest, most complex brains on Earth. Their language and communication skills are highly advanced. And recent scientific findings suggest that the parts of their brain controlling cognition and emotion are even more highly developed than in humans. This is likely why they show empathy toward each other and other species, as well as tolerance, trust, and a desire to help. Dolphins are known to rescue humans in danger, saving sailors lost at sea, swimmers fallen overboard, or surfers in danger from nearby sharks. They've also come to the rescue of other species, such as seals. Sometimes they seek out human attention, companionship, and teamwork. People who have developed relationships with wild dolphins say that they seem to appreciate being treated as equals with respect and understanding. In the town of Laguna, Brazil, fishermen and wild dolphins work together to catch fish. Dolphins herd the fish close to shore, where the fishermen wait with nets. At the dolphin's signal, fishermen throw their nets out and catch more fish with the dolphins' help. And dolphins also get some fish in the process. Dolphins are self-aware and can recognize their own reflection in a mirror. They have a sense of self, considered one of the most sophisticated aspects of consciousness. Dolphins live in communities with complex social networks. Some stay in their mother's pod for their entire lives. Their tight-knit families allow for collaborative hunting, to ward off rivals, and to raise their young together. Dolphins live in a world of sound. Their bioacoustic sonar has been called the most sophisticated sensory system on the planet. They emit pulses of sound that provide incredibly detailed 3D information about their surroundings up to hundreds of yards away, and use unique whistles, squeaks, and trills to communicate with each other. They even have individual signature whistles that act as names. Dolphins are also known to mourn the loss of a family member. A mother carries her dead infant on her back, unwilling to let the baby sink below the surface. In so many situations, dolphins show an unbridled love of play, gliding on the pressure wave created by a boat's bow, surfing the wake behind a boat, riding waves breaking along shore just for the fun of it. Dolphins also create games such as Let's Play the Leaf Game and carry a leaf around on our fins. So superbly evolved for lives in the ocean. In the wild, they have the free will to seek out play, to help others, and be with their families. Decades ago, when orcas and smaller dolphins were first captured and placed in concrete tanks, we had no sense of their lives and community, no understanding of their intelligence and empathy. No clue that those clicks and whistles likely form a language so complex that scientists still can't understand it. It's time that orcas and dolphins in the wild have a legally recognized right to live free from human-caused harm and captivity. And it's time for dolphins held captive in tanks to be retired to seaside sanctuaries where they aren't forced to perform and can live out their lives in an ocean home. The time to act is now, because orcas and other dolphins are still being captured around the world for display in captivity. And because we now understand just how magnificent dolphins really are.